So is that thing recording?
It is.
This is really embarrassing.
It's going to be outstanding. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Nothing but positivity.
So how far can I wander? Because most of the crew's over here, so I'm going to kind of go from about here
Yes.
to about way over there. So my name's Tom Larson. I'm with Allen Curtis and Sons. Thank you for having us. And more importantly, thank you for the purchase of the G1 SCBAs. So we're kind of making the rounds and just talking through the product, kind of going through it in detail, making sure everybody's kind of comfortable with the bells and whistles and kind of how they work. So please ask questions. It's way more fun if you guys will ask questions and heckle and throw things, because then we'll throw them back and all that kind of stuff. So I like to start out with the mask, just to kind of cover this. There's a lot to the mask. We'll talk about cleaning, both just basic cleaning and then kind of more in-depth cleaning. So masks, when MSA designed the G1, they basically took a whiteboard and brought the engineers and kind of explored what the firefighters wanted on the SCBA. And just about everybody said, take all that garbage stuff off the mask. Make the mask as light, as clean, as free of attachments as it can be. So this is the mask they came up with. There's no electronics on this thing. There's no batteries on this thing. It's just a straight up mask. So that being said, I'm assuming everybody's going to be issued their own personal mask. And here's the point. This is your mask. Take care of it. Clean it, protect it, baby it. This is your lifeline to clean air. You go into an IDLH environment, man, this thing better be functioning and working. Please take care of them. They have an anti-scratch material on the outside of the lens. They have an anti-fog material on the inside of the lens. You've probably been fit tested, so there's a large, medium, and small skirt, and there's a large, medium, and small nose cup on these things. And those things, that's the only component that changes in size. So the lenses are all the same, the bezels are all the same, all the other components are the same size. The only thing that would change would be large, medium, and small nose cups and skirts. Okay? So these are 5-point attachments. So there's a contact attachment point here, and then there's 4 points of adjustment. There's 2 on the temples, and then there's 2 down around the chin box. So that's the head net. That's kind of how it works. These little D-rings on here will attach to the shoulder strap, so if you're just staging and want to clip that onto the little ring there, that'll hold it in place, and you can go from there. If you look at the bottom of the face piece, there's 2 different diameter holes. The small hole is where the second stage is going to attach to the whole thing here, but the smaller hole is where the airflow path goes into this small hole. When you look at this mask, there's a little flat gate valve right in the front side of this mask. So when you take a breath of air, it goes in through the small hole, it goes up and deflects through that little gate valve. It circulates inside the lens, and it's going to pull up any moisture, and you'll breathe that in through the nose cup and in through your mouth, into your lungs, and then when you exhale, it comes out through the exhalation valve, and it gets purged out into the atmosphere. So there's no cross-contamination that's going back into the second stage regulator. So the only thing that you have to worry about clean is the mask. You don't have to clean, decontaminate the SCBA itself. So pretty straightforward on that. If you look down into the larger diameter here, there's some little circles in there. They're kind of little white plastic dots in there. Those are basically light pipes, or they're kind of fiber optics. So all the electronic stuff is on the second stage. When we attach that to the mask, the lights will illuminate, and these little light pipes will transfer the light from the second stage up into the little heads-up display modules that are inside the mask. There's a heads-up display module on the right-hand side, and that would show your 4 heads-up display for your air pressure in the cylinder, and then the heads-up display monitor on the left side is some communication stuff. So you might see an amber light that shows up for your low battery indicator, and then there's some communication and some thermal temperature things that might pop up in that display window as well. So, if you were to wear the mask and put it on and you were not breathing air off the cylinder, This little gap right here at the bottom is an open port, so you would just be breathing in and out direct ambient air, and there's no resistance. There's no springs that it overcomes or has to go through. It just breathes straight in. It's just a straight port that you can breathe ambient air. So then when you snap the second stage regulator in there, it seals all that stuff off. So that's kind of how that works. So, sorry, I'm thinking about things because I start talking about all this stuff and want to make sure I cover all the bases. So on a normal, yeah.
Exhalation valve, if it sticks or how often does it stick, submersion cleaning, how do we overcome all that? Is it just by exhalation, or will we have to manually relieve the plastic or the spring at any point?
Yes, yes, and yes. So I'm going to talk about the cleaning process right now. I will show you the exhalation valve and kind of talk about why it would get stuck in the first place, and then we'll show you how quickly it is to kind of clear that. So great segue, because we're going to go into the cleaning. Let's say you've been out, brand new SCBAs are going into service, and you're just out kind of doing some drills and skills and breathing through the mask and breathing a cylinder of air. So you come back into the fire station for basic cleaning, so we haven't really gotten debris and dirt scattered everywhere, so we just want to kind of clean it off and get the sweat and saliva and stuff out of the mask. So get a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket or a sink, and add a little bit of cleaning solution. So MSA has a product called Confidence Plus. So an ounce of that goes into the sink. You can use just regular dish detergent as well. So a couple of drops of that and put that in the sink. So when you clean it, just basic cleaning, what I suggest is take the head net, put it up over the lens, and your water solution would be in the sink or in the bucket. And if you look at the skirt, you try to keep that level, so this goes into the water level, and then submerge it, and then agitate it up and down. And what we're trying to do is force some water pressure so it just exercises through the exhalation valves and through the contact points down there. So once we use our solution, you can either use the tap and in the sink, or if you had another sink and just some clean rinse water, do the same thing. Agitate that thing in there, rinse it a couple of times. Dab the lens with a soft cloth. We don't want you rubbing the lens in any way. Try to keep that as clean and scratch-free as possible. So when you drain the water out of it, if you look at the skirt, this skirt has kind of a reverse seal on it. So make sure you pull that down and get the water to kind of drain the water from out of that. If you let it air dry, make sure that you put it so that the lens is face up, so that water droplets will drain off the lens and not collect down in the bottom and kind of leave some hard water deposits down in the bottom of the lens. So basic cleaning, been out, just worked an SCBA cylinder, little solution in a sink or in a bucket, submerge it, agitate it, rinse it a couple of times, make sure you drain the water, let it dry, come back after it's dried, put it on your face, and then close it off and just blow into the mask so that you exercise that exhalation valve. Okay, so any questions on just basic cleaning? Just keep this thing clean, right? You work with it today and go home, go on a couple of days off, come back a couple of days later, stick your face in there, it's got kind of a funky smell. Well, keep them clean and you'll minimize some of that. So the next thing is we want to take it down to the next level. Let's say we've had a house fire, we've been kind of in rehab, and we had some dirt, debris, cellulose stuff falling down in the mask. We kind of have shaken it out, but we know that stuff's in there. So we want to clean the mask to the next level. And or maybe it's the annual fit test. So you're going in for your annual fit test. You want to make sure that this thing's working correctly. So I'm going to show you how to disassemble this thing. And right on the bottom of this mask, if you look at it, this is kind of a little plastic cap that's going to come off. So right towards the bottom of that, there's a little slot. Kind of extend that out. See that little flat kind of slot? It's just about the right size for a flat-bladed screwdriver. So that being said, does anybody have a utility tool in their pocket? Or do they have a key in their pocket with a small diameter hose on there, or small
Want to use this one again?
Yeah. Launch that, Sean. Thank you. Okay, so I've got my MSA customized mask repair tool, or you could use a flat-bladed screwdriver. So I'm just going to make purchase right into that little slot there. And when I do, I push that in there, and I'll pull it. I'm just pushing it back or twisting it, and I'll hear a click. So once I get that click done, thank you very much, that little cap will come off. So notice the shape of it. It's kind of a little wedge. So the wedge piece goes forward, and then also that wedge piece has to nest in that perfect orientation right there. So a little tab comes off, take that off. So that's the exposure to my exhalation valve. So I've taken the cap off, and that is my exhalation valve right there. And notice that the exhalation valve has just a little bridge piece of material here, and it's holding that spring down. So I'm going to grab onto one side of that, and I'm just going to pull it apart and take that little bridge piece off, and my spring should stay attached. So this material is soft and it just flexes, so I'm just pulling it apart so that it will come off those little posts. Take that off, and then that is my exhalation valve right there. Little round disc has a little post. That little post is just the glide pattern, so it helps keep it oriented. But when I clean this, I want to make sure there's no sand, hair follicles, or anything like that that would be interfering with the seal. So this thing just sits in there, slides up and down, and I want to make sure that that's clean and free of any debris. So you guys are going to take a look at that. So that's the seat that's in there. That's my little flapper valve. It's nice and soft. It's just a little soft piece of material. So that goes in there. This sits in there. And it goes across the top. That makes sense? So I would do the same procedure cleaning this. I would tear it apart like this, and I would put these pieces individually into the bucket of water. I would clean them, rinse them, dry them, and then I would reassemble this stuff. So when I put it back together, I'm just going to kind of put the exhalation valve back in, orientation, nice, slides back down in place. My little spring is pretty intuitive on how it goes back together. So a little round part of the spring covers over my exhalation valve, and then I just straddle across the top there and push that back into place. I'll hear those two little buttons get clicked into place, and that's oriented back in where it needs to be. So see that line back up. So those little pins on the side, just it makes it go back together pretty simple. Back around. So the cover plate that goes back on here, make sure the small end goes down first, and when it lines up, it just hooks under that little tab, and you kind of look at it, feel it, make sure it's all oriented correctly. The easiest thing to do is just pinch it, so between your palms and fingers, and I'm just pinching it back, and I don't know if you could hear that click, but the little tab will lock back into place, and then that has been reassembled. So if I look in the bottom of my mask, if for some reason I was wearing my mask, trained a little bit, put it back on the shelf, and put my face in there and was blowing out on it, and my exhalation valve is stuck, what I can do is get like a little blunt object, kind of a soft end of a toothpick or maybe a paper clip, and I can open up the bottom of the nose cup in here, and I can see that little stem where it's kind of poking through the bottom. That's my exhalation valve. So if it was stuck, I could just push down on that, and it's going to overpressure that spring and open up that exhalation valve. And that should keep that clean and free from getting stuck. Okay. So that's the mask, pretty straightforward. The gold piece in there that's got some circles in it, looks like honeycomb. That's your speaking diaphragm, so please don't poke holes in that thing. It's been known to happen. Can't breathe very well, so people start poking holes in that thing, but that's part of your speaking diaphragm, and it helps with your passive speaking. So keep that clean. You can take the nose cup out when you clean, just make sure that you get it seated all the way around the speaking diaphragm, and then if you do take the rubber nose cup out of there, you have to get back down in the bottom of it and make sure that the seal goes all the way around the exhalation valve as well. So those can come out, you just yank on them and pull them out. So pretty straightforward. Okay, questions? Good. The cylinders are 4,500 PSI cylinders, so carbon cylinders look pretty straightforward like this. You got your valve that opens and closes. One thing that MSA did, and this was just brilliant on their engineering design, is they added this little wedge piece to the valve assembly. That little wedge will slide down into the SCBA frame and it holds it in place. So they call that the little dovetail design, and it's pretty cool. Got the rubber bumper on the bottom of the valve cover to help protect that. And then these SCBAs have all been equipped with a quick disconnect. So this is a nipple that's been threaded onto the CGA thread on the valve. So this is torqued on with 20 foot-pounds of torque. So it's a crescent wrench, and it's a little bit of effort. It's not a crescent wrench and stand way back here and a whole bunch of grunt muscle.
Cheater bar.
Yeah, don't need a cheater bar on that. So one of your daily checks, or one of your checks, if you're changing a cylinder, grab onto that off with your hands. It's on there sufficiently. If it's loose, you need to grab a wrench and put a little muscle on it and tighten that thing back up. So this is a potential leak point. But whoever's doing kind of the service on the SCBAs and stuff should be checking those periodically, and you as a firefighter, please make sure those are kind of snugged on there when you're using it. So SCBA frame, little dovetail. You can load the cylinder in from the top, or you can load the cylinder in from the bottom. It makes no difference. But line up that little dovetail, and when it slides down, it captures it in place. It's brilliant. It just holds it there right in place. So the quick connect system is this little adapter right here that will be on all your SCBAs, and it's a double release mechanism. It's a double locking mechanism. So it's spring loaded open right now, and when I push it on, it will snap, and this gray collar will twist and lock into place. So when I put it on, I'm just going to compress it. The gray collar actually moves forward and twists and locks into place. So if I just twist it, it's not going to pop off. I need to twist it and pull everything back. So twist it, take the tension out, and then I can remove the quick connect cylinder. So put it on, twist locks it into place. So this is brilliant, especially coming back to the fire station and filling SCBA bottles. So at the fill containment station, this quick lock system is going to be really nice. Makes it quick, a little faster to connect the cylinders. Moving up, we've got the cylinder tensioning band. So this is a stainless steel band. It holds its shape, it holds its place. So when you take the cylinder out, slide one in, you don't have to hold the fabric strap out. It just holds its shape really well. The cam lock side of it, there's two little black tabs on this that are spring loaded, and I have to depress both of those. I pinch those, and then that will release the buckle, so it'll take the tension out of there. So pinch both sides. If I just do one side or the other, it doesn't release, but if I pinch it, release it, that will open up, and then I've got the slack that I need. On the opposite side, there's a little metal tab, and I can push down on that and take the tension out of that, and then I can adjust my cylinder band for larger diameter cylinders or possibly smaller diameter cylinders. So there's kind of a sweet spot. There's like two positions in that system that work pretty well. If you look at the cam lock system, there's a spring tensioner on here. So if I adjust this to the right position, it puts a little bit of tension on that spring and it pulls it tight. So there's two positions on this cam lock that kind of seem to work pretty good. One puts a little bit of tension on that spring, just kind of pulls it apart slightly, and then the other position puts a little bit more tension on there. So it kind of locks it into place. So pretty straightforward how that works, right? The SCBA frame is a composite material, thermal rated. The handle holds here are rated a 500-pound pulling capacity, so meant to be pulled. Pulling capacity, so if I had a D-ring or laced a strap through there, it's a 1,000-pound pulling capacity. Hoses are kind of routed through the SCBA frame to keep it nice and streamlined. On the bottom, the waist belt down here is adjustable. So there's a little kind of metal bar right here, and if I pull it forward, it's kind of a spring tension. If I pull it forward, I can adjust the waist belt into an upper position, a middle position, and then the lower position, and that accommodates different lengths of torsos. So we can accommodate kind of a personal fit for everybody. The waist belt swivels and pivots. So we're gonna kind of get into that buzzword, the ergonomics, and make sure that everybody is wearing this as comfortable as possible. The shoulder straps have reflective material on the front. On the bottom side of the shoulder straps, there's two different materials. This is an AirShield material. This black material, it's kind of sticky, tacky, so that when you're wearing the SCBA, shoulder straps come over the top. Hopefully that's going to kind of hold them in place and they don't slip as much. This gray material, it's on the bottom of the shoulder strap, and the gray material around the waist belt. They're going to accommodate the coat kind of twisting and moving and sliding up and down and keep it in place. So there's two different materials there by design, and that's what the intention is. This is sticky and this is a little bit more slippery. That's how that works.
Is there a chest harness on it? No.
I was just looking at that. This SCBA does not have a chest harness, but your SCBAs do have a chest harness. So there is a chest harness. This is a sample one we just brought in. So when you pull yours out of the box, there is a chest harness on yours. Okay, so all the SCBAs, once they've been delivered, have rechargeable batteries. So this is a lithium-ion technology. This is the rechargeable batteries. So there's contact points on one end of it. So you can see the little contact points. There's a gasket that goes around there, and then the battery cavity right here on the back of the SCBA has little contact pogo pins that make contact and give it the energy. So if you look at the shape of that battery, it's kind of beveled. It's got this little ridge that goes around, and it's tapered on the inside. So the battery only goes in one direction, contact points down, tapered side goes into the middle of the SCBA, and it snaps into place. On the male end of the waist belt strap is the battery removal tool. And there's a slot in that male end, and when you make purchase, you just go to the top side of the battery. There's a little gap right there. Poke that in there, and that springs and pops right out. So for battery maintenance, if we had batteries in the SCBAs for a couple of weeks and it was my responsibility to come in and do a battery check, I would come in, check the battery. If I need to change it, I take it out. I believe every fire station is going to have a battery charger, and that has 6 battery slots in it, and then you will have a couple of spare batteries. So take the spare battery out, put this one back in to the battery charger, take your recharged battery and slap it back into the SCBA, and you're good to go. So a couple of little conversational points about the batteries. Lithium-ion, they're smart batteries. They don't have a memory, so if we use half of the energy out of the battery and I put it back in the charger and let it charge back up, I still have the full energy of that battery, so it doesn't short cycle the energy that's in there. So the battery life, the operational time of the battery we're saying is about 8 hours. But these SCBAs also have a thermal imager built into them, so when I turn on the thermal imager, it's going to use battery energy a little bit faster. I can't really tell you should be able to get so many hours out of the battery from an operational perspective. So just get in the habit of checking the battery energy and cycling through them, whether that's on a weekly basis or a monthly basis.
How do you check?
Is there a bar on there or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, during use, is there an
Yeah,
indicator?
they're gonna show you how to check the battery status. So if the battery was sitting in the SCBA and the SCBA was just sitting in the apparatus and we haven't checked it for a couple of days, for every day that goes by, if the battery is in the SCBA, we're gonna lose about 1% of the battery's energy. So in 30 days, I'm gonna lose a third of the battery. You know, in 2 months, I'm gonna lose 2/3 of the battery, and it's definitely time to charge the battery and change it. Keep it full.
That's without use
That's
versus
just sitting there. So in today's world and today's technology with the electronic stuff, they're using just a little milliamp of energy, and that's what we deplete, about 1% per day. So if I change a battery, it's my day, go in, looking at the SCBA, decide that I need to change the battery, grab a fresh one that's all charged up, and put it back in. What I've done is broken the continuity of the energy on the battery. When I put that back into the SCBA is going to go into a full cycle, and it's actually going to turn on. So I need to be cognizant of that. If it's breakfast time and I smell the bacon cooking and I go running off and forget that I just changed the battery, in about 20 seconds this thing's going to go into full alarm. So once I change a battery, I need to turn it off again. So either green button on either side of that console. Once it's kind of gone through its quick check, if I tap that twice, really fast succession, it will turn itself off again. So once I change a battery, I have to wait for a second and then turn it off. So now it's back to just being dormant and waiting for some activity to go to before we go to work again. Okay, so the question was, how do I check the battery status? How much energy I have in the SCBA. So the SCBA is sitting in the apparatus. I come on duty, it's my day, walk up to the apparatus, open the door, grab the console, and again, either green button. Just press and hold that green button for a couple of seconds, and it will pop up with my battery indicator. So that battery indicator bar populates, and it has potentially 5 green bars in there. If it has 5 green bars, it's completely charged. So it'll start trickling down, and then it'll just go back to dormant again. Once I get down and I've used a little bit of battery energy and I only have 2 bars left, those 2 bars are going to turn to amber in color, and then definitely want to be changing batteries at that point to make sure they're fully charged. If I was to turn this SCBA on and use it, and I had those 2 energy bars in amber color, then I would start to see an amber light show up on my second stage regulator when I was wearing the SCBA when it was turned on. So if it's turned off, I can press and hold and see what my energy bars are at. But if I'm wearing the SCBA and it's powered up, turned on, and I get down below that threshold, those 2 bars turn amber, it's going to show me an amber light on that display. So that's how I check my batteries. Good?
And a dead battery doesn't have anything to do with the mechanical operation of the pack at all, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So the systems are kind of redundant. So all the pneumatic stuff, all the air stuff is mechanical. So if there was not a battery in the SCBA, I would still be able to use the SCBA. I would have ample air supply. It would function 100% from the air delivery perspective. MSA was really smart. They also put an analog gauge, so if I didn't have any battery energy at all, I would still have an analog gauge so I could see what my pressure rating was. I would lose my pass device. I'd lose my heads-up display. I'd lose some of the alarms that would go off. But the low air alarm bell, which is right here at the bottom of the SCBA, that is also mechanical. So when I got into that low air alarm, if I wasn't paying attention to my gauge and I got into that low air alarm situation, my mechanical bell would go off. So yeah, that question's come up a couple of times about losing battery consumption period.
At what threshold would you change the battery out? You said 2 lights left. I mean, how much working time is that? Would you change it out at 2 bars down, or?
I would change it when it hits, so there's 5 bars. Once it gets to that 3rd bar, I'd be changing batteries. I mean, it is so easy to change and manage these
Right.
batteries. I mean, there's no reason why you should be letting it get too far down.
Yeah.
Battery removal tool, snap it out, snap it in. And you guys will kind of have to see how often the batteries are going dead for this department, how often you use the SCBA, how long they're sitting there. So, yeah, great question. Okay, any other questions? All right, moving on. So when I wear the SCBA, I'm gonna kind of eyeball it. I usually like to put it kind of in the middle position for me. Seems to work to get started with. So I'm gonna slide that into the middle position. When I don the SCBA, however you do it, whether it's over the shoulder or over your head, I'm gonna sling the SCBA up and on. When you wear the SCBA, again going back to that big ergonomic buzzword, I want you to hike the SCBA way up above your hip bones, connect the waist belt, and it's a pull forward design, so pull the straps forward and tighten that waist belt up nice and tight. So all the weight of the SCBA is resting up high on my hip bones, above my belt line. If this had a chest strap, I would connect the chest strap and making sure that the chest strap would go under my 2nd stage hose. So if the chest strap goes over it, I lose a little bit of flexibility. So if that chest strap is under it, I maintain all that flexibility of the hose right there. So then I would connect the chest strap and then come back and adjust the shoulder straps for comfort, but don't over tighten those things. If I tighten them way down, every time I lift my arm, I'm lifting the weight of the SCBA. So this is more of a comfort factor right there. A little bit of looseness every time I'm lifting my arms, not lifting the weight of the SCBA. Good. So the regulator valve is on the right-hand side. You're used to where that's oriented. Open it all the way, back it off half a turn, and once you put air pressure to the system, it will turn itself on. Goes through a quick diagnostic check, and it will. And my voice amplification module is on my left shoulder here. This is my console displaying right here. So my digital pressure gauge is showing same as what my analog pressure gauge is showing. So in order to conserve a little bit of energy, these SCBAs have been programmed from the factory to turn off the digital display. So I'm not looking at it, I don't need to see what my digital display is, but if I want to see it, if I pick up my console, that will illuminate again. Or if it's hanging down and I want to see what it is, I can press a button, either green button, and that will illuminate my digital display as well. So the heads-up display light kind of work in conjunction with that as well. So the heads-up display lights will stay on. Right now I have a full cylinder, so I have the 4 heads-up display lights. But then after a period of time, those will go out. So they may not be illuminated. This one probably is turned on all the time. So if they're not illuminated, I can still press one of the green buttons and then that will illuminate those heads-up display lights as well. So if I'm wearing it, checking to see what my heads-up display lights are indicating, press one of the green buttons and that will illuminate my heads-up display lights. Okay. So as I work with the SCBA and I'm out breathing, taking a breath of air out, just simulating that I'm wearing it, take a breath of air. Right now I have 4 green lights. Green is good, green means go. Take a couple more breaths of air out of there. I get down below 3/4. So I lose one of my heads-up display lights. You guys are all familiar with heads-up display lights. Below 3/4. So one of the other things that MSA has done is on my console, I've got a primary display screen that populates. I can push one of the green buttons really quick and it will go to a secondary display screen. And that secondary display screen on this palette right here is showing my remaining breathing time. So the first thing that shows up is my pressure, but if I press one of the green buttons really fast, it will flash over to that secondary display. I've got 32 minutes of breathing time remaining. So take a couple more breaths of air out of the SCBA. Kind of working a little bit. Now my breathing time's probably gone down to a little. So what happens is it takes 3 minutes of, when you start breathing off the SCBA, it takes 3 minutes to build the algorithm for that breathing time. But then it will update and refresh that breathing time every 30 seconds. So it takes a minute to get it started, but then it'll update it every 30 seconds. So the more air I breathe, obviously the less time I'm going to have on that display. So notice that when I went below a half of a cylinder, got down below a half, my console display lights went to amber. So green is good, green means go. Amber, yellow means caution. Start thinking about where you're at in air management terms. So heads up display lights go amber. Once I go into my intermediate pressure, I also get an amber display light on the outside of my second stage regulator. When I'm in full air, my green heads up display lights, that's not going to display in green. But once I go into my intermediate, it's going to populate that with an amber light. So buddy lights on the back are going to do the same thing. Got buddy lights. So I'm creating a 360 visual display of what's going on with me in the fire grounds. Take another breath of air out. What happens after a green, yellow, goes to red. So once I go into my red, my low air alarm, I'm going to get my low air alarm bell. I'm also going to illuminate my universal rescue connection. So there's a white light that will illuminate that rescue connection. So take another breath of air out of there. Console goes red. Heads up display lights are red. And then I also illuminate that rescue connection. So MSA has done a really good job creating visual senses and audible senses all 360 degrees around that firefighter. So this is my second stage regulator. The two little knockouts right on the bottom there, those are microphones. So when I snap that into my face piece, when I speak into it, those are the microphones that will pick up and project out of my voice amplification. The red valve on the right-hand side when I'm wearing this is my bypass valve. So if I open it a little bit, I'll get a little air. If I open it a lot, it'll flow more air. So this is my bypass valve. So when I put it into the mask, it is directional. So it has to fit in one specific orientation. There's a little tiny slit in the clip on the top. There's a notch right there. It has to fit in that orientation. So when I snap it in, it's got two locking mechanisms. There's a clip on the bottom and there's a clip on the top. Snap it in and locks it into place. When I remove that, just use finger and thumb, pinch both of those and pull it straight out. The button on the bottom of the second stage will stop my airflow going through the second stage regulator. So it's a single motion, pinch and remove, and it will stop your airflow plus take the second stage out of the mask. So if I'm wearing the mask and I'm looking kind of down over my nose, I can see this little, looking through the lens, I can see that little projection on the bezel of the lens. And then I can watch kind of the top button, the gray button, and I can just kind of line those things up and kind of watch them come in and mate them that way. So visually I can kind of watch that thing come up. So if I'm wearing the mask, take the regulator out of the holster, reach over the top of the second stage hose line, grab it with finger and thumb. If you kind of let it hang there, holster and straight up and into the mask. It orients this red valve on the right-hand side, and then you can just snap it straight into the face piece. So, good? Okay, donning the mask. I like to put the head net over the front of the lens. For those of us that have long hair, bangs, want to make sure that's pulled out of the way. I know some of us, right?
It's me. Gosh, leave me alone.
So if you put the head net over the front of the lens, then you can kind of bring that up to your face, and keeping your hair out of the way. Put that in place, head net over the top. If you grab this little black strap on the back, that can kind of help pull it down into place. Tensioning straps on the side, tensioning straps on the temple area, reposition if you need to. So that's my open port. I'm just breathing in and out. There's no resistance to breathing right now. Second stage is in my holster. So reach over the top, take that out, orient that. I'm kind of lining it up, watching it come in. First breath on. Once I go on to my first breath on, it activates my voice amplification system. So what happens is inside the mask, when I take a breath in, it goes into a negative pressure environment inside my mask, and it should cancel out my voice amplification. When I talk, or when I breathe out, I put positive pressure back into the mask, and that will activate the microphones that are down inside the second stage. So breathe in, it should cancel that out. Start talking, breathing out, and it will amplify that voice amplification. So, do a search, hey, what's going on in here? Is breakfast ready? See something nasty over in the corner, I can turn that off. Press and hold the little blue button on the top for a second. It will turn off my voice amplification. And go over and say, hey, we're done with shift today. Let's go out and have a good after work, right? Then I can go back to the situation I'm working on and say, hey, everything's good in there. It's all clear. We're good to go back to work. So we can cancel out that voice amplification if we need to. So that's how that works. Remember, when I take the second stage out of the mask, finger, thumb, top and bottom, pinch that, and it will stop my airflow. So remove that, go back into the holster, and remove the mask, and good to go. So, one of the other really cool features about the SCBA is there's a thermal imager that's built into this console. So this little stub on the very end of it is your thermal imager, that's the lens on it. And to get to the thermal imager, again, it's either green button. I'm going to press and hold that green button. And you heard the chirping going on there, so now I've flashed over to that thermal imager display. So I'm going to kind of wander around. The thermal imager display has got a good picture. It's 220 pixels by 176 across. So it's a pretty good image. Right now, I held the button, so I flashed over into my secondary display mode, and I've got my thermal imager that's populated there. So that's my thermal imager display, and all I'm doing is pressing one of the buttons. Now, the really cool thing with digital technology is now I can get really psychedelic with some of the colors. So if I press a button again, I can go from a white hot to a black hot palette, and I can start scrolling through all the color palettes that are loaded in this thing. Right now we've got some patriotic colors, we've got some white hot, black hot, we've got some really psychedelic colors going on there. My question is, when you look at a colored thermal imager display like that, what do the colors mean? What's hot? What's not? So the really cool thing is that MSA has provided 22 different color palettes to choose from. The challenge is picking those few color palettes that make sense. And you guys get to program the color palettes that you want to have in here. So we'll come back, show you how to do that, and we can change those color palettes. So press and hold the button, and it will flash from your pressure mode screen to your thermal imager display. Once you're in that thermal imager display mode, I'm just pressing the button very quickly, and then it will scroll through the different color palettes that are loaded into the thermal imager. And the same thing, once you're in your pressure display mode, if I'm in my pressure display mode, if I hit the button really quick, it'll flash over to that secondary display that's showing my time remaining until I'm out of air. So that's how the console works. I don't know if you picked up that right now I'm in green air supply. so I've got a good full cylinder. Green is good, green means go. Everything's flashing green. When I'm in my thermal imager display, I lose my colorization out of the display screen, but my colorization moves up to that analog display screen. So if I was to close the valve and go into that intermediate pressure range, right now that's showing green, but if I go down into my intermediate pressure range, the color display is going to go to the amber color. And then if I go into my low air alarm, that analog display screen is going to go into red. So again, MSA has done a really brilliant job of kind of creating that 360-degree visual for the color effects and the audible tones that you hear on the SCBA.
Whenever we were messing with them out at Bays, I remember there's something that you hit like both buttons and this little bar was loading something.
So
What is that?
you were getting into a programming sequence. So once you got into that programming sequence, the SCBA was looking for data that you're trying to download to it. So it'll just sit in that mode for a couple of seconds and then turn off. So yeah, good creative, testing of the SCBA. Good job. So, that's all I've got, unless you've got questions.
Charge rate on the batteries with the charger.
So if the battery is completely empty and you put a battery in a charger, it's going to take 4 hours to charge it completely full. If you're just halfway down on a battery and drop it in a charger, it's going to take like an hour to top it off. So it's not an equal proportion of time versus energy that you're trying to put back in there. For some reason it takes longer just when the battery is completely empty.
And when we got them from the factory, the first bank was like 6 hours for each of the
It
first.
took a little longer. Maybe it's
Yeah.
6 hours for a completely empty one. Yeah, MSA doesn't charge all the batteries all the way up, so it depends on how they come out of the factory. But one of the departments yesterday was kind of talking about that change cycle, and they were thinking that, hey, once a week, what we'll do is we've got 4 spare batteries, so that's enough batteries to change all the SCBA batteries in one apparatus. So on Mondays, we'll go in and change the ladder. On Tuesday, we'll come back in and change the engine. On Wednesday, we'll change the rescue, or however that works for you. So I think the intention was that you would have enough spare batteries, excuse me, to change all the SCBAs in one apparatus, and then you could just kind of recharge them and cycle through them that way. And that makes a lot of sense. So MSA does offer an alkaline battery pack. It looks exactly the same. It has 6 C-cell batteries in it. So some of the conversation yesterday was, does it make sense to have one of the alkaline batteries? No. Rechargeable batteries are absolutely the way to go. Where it does make sense to have you to be thinking about it maybe is if you deploy a wildland crew. If you take an apparatus and you send them to California to fight fire for a month, well, they may not have that battery charger to take with them, so they could take a full battery and then they could take a couple of alkaline battery cases and then change batteries as they needed to. So that makes sense, unless you just send them out with a battery charger